Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Glenn will introduce the chaplain of the day. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues. Would you please help me welcome Bishop Anthony Alford, a native of Gulfport, Mississippi. Bishop Alford is the husband of Takara Mim Alford of Chicago, Illinois. Bishop Alford is a proud father of 5 beautiful children. In 1975, Bishop joined the military where he served 30 years. During his tenure in the military, Bishop Alford established 3 ministries and pastored 7 churches. He additionally assumed duties as a spiritual lay leader for the U.S. Army chaplaincy program on many occasions during his military assignment. Those churches were geographically located around the globe. Bishop Alford is also a wartime veteran that has served 2 tours in Iraq and several other tours overseas. Bishop Alford and I share a common theme. After all those tours, both of us need 20 pills to go to sleep and 10 to wake up. Bishop Alford retired from the military service in June 2005. Among his many awards and achievements during his military service, his greatest accomplishment was his promotion to Command Sergeant Major and receiving the Legion of Merit. Mr. Alford is a spiritual visionary and a current pastor and founder of Faith Worth Center in Clarksville, Tennessee. He opened the doors and organized Faith Worth Center in June 2006. Following a God-given vision to make disciples, build their faith, and equip them to share the kingdom of God, he joined the fight with his peers. Together, they combined forces to overcome the darkness of the world and raise up a nation that will obey God. His goal, unless souls are saved, nothing is gained. Please welcome Bishop Alford.
Good morning. Before I pray, I just want to take the time that I have to just leave something within this esteemed chamber. I knew exactly where I was on September 11th at 8:43 or 49 in the morning. I was inspecting troops. I was a public servant. So I come here today to the esteemed house to leave you with something that we're thought. This is February, which is Black History Month. And the theme this year is African Americans and the arts. What is arts? It is art itself, its skills, its cunning, its artifacts, and its crafts. So I like to be cunning today, to leave a thought with you all as you move forward within this chamber long after I am gone. Before I pray, I want to introduce you to 2 public servants that I brought to this podium with me today. They have been serving since the ages of wood and bronze. They have worked together while being ever so different. They will never be the same. And when they do work together, they create 2 things, control and precision. To be clear, these 2 public servants have given you faithful allegiance as late as this morning. Your daily vote to them is outstanding. They will always be separate parties, but when they are faced with tough situations, they intentionally come together because of the hand who voted them in. I want to introduce you and leave these 2 public servants with you today so that the next time you're facing a tough state situation, Representative Knife and Representative Fork. Whatever you face after today, sometime you're going to have to come together to make it work. I leave these 2 public servants with you today. Let's pray. Lord, today, we thank you for this great assembly. Give more wisdom and knowledge to these men and women as they provide service for the greatest state in our union, Tennessee. Remind all of us only 3 things last forever: the soul of people, the word of God, and you, Almighty God. The goal of this prayer is to make their voices validated by a vote in heaven. We ask that you help us to put ethics before ego, purpose before personality, and public before party. And when it's all said and done, teach us with our hearts to do justly, to love mercifully, and to walk humbly, faithfully while discharging the duties of the office on which we have all entered. This we ask in your Son Jesus' name, amen. God bless you.
Representative Glenn will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Harris and Vidal are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Kapler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If all members will please rise. Mr. Speaker, if we could take a brief moment of silence for the 5 U.S. Marines that were lost this week and silent prayer for their families and colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are many fine folks that work in this Capitol, and one of the best, in my humble opinion, is Commissioner Stuart McWhorter. And if you could rise for just a moment, please. His sister, Jody, about a week ago, lost her valiant battle with cancer. She has passed on, and I'm sure is in a better place where she's not hurt anymore. But I want to just have our prayers with the McWhorter family as they mourn the loss of his sister, Jody. If we can have just a moment of silence, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to welcome and acknowledge my intern for this session, Ms. Delaney Moore. She's a junior at UT Knoxville, political science major, and interested in going to law school. Bless her heart. Thank you, Delaney.
Representative Hemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wanted to welcome some pages today from a district. We have Noah Namis, Elliot Roth, Yoav Sorik, Viola Goldkorn, Maitel Kulik, and Noam Barzell. Please welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jack and Jaws here have me all tied up. I get to make an announcement that I don't get to make very often. Actually, somebody made it down from our area. Angie Odom and her 2 daughters, Isabella Odom and Messia Manley. Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we could give a warm welcome to 4 young ladies from Hollow Rock Brewston Central School District, Miss Abigail Hollingsworth, Ansley Hollingsworth, Taylor Graves, Ava Anthony, and their sponsor, Christy Brasher, and a special thank you to their parents, Michael and Christy Graves, for getting them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to welcome Jeff McAvoy up in the West Gallery, who is a mortgage banker from Memphis, and I know a friend of several in here.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this may have happened, but I don't remember it. I found out yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I really want a moment of silent prayer for him. One of our former colleagues, many of you all may know Les Winningham. Les Winningham served here for about 21 years, 22 years. He was the chairman of education, okay? And we were suite mates. And Les was he was just a great man. He really was a sweetheart of a man. But one of the things I remember about him is that he had 5 daughters. He was a principal at one point in time. He had 5 daughters. And at one time, he was sending all of his kids to school at one time. That's a lot. That's a tremendous amount of pressure. But he was doing it, and he was glad when they got married. He told me himself. But he was a beautiful man. If you don't mind, just a moment of silent prayer for him and his family. Amen. Thank you.
Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to welcome 2 constituents from the 65th House District, Bill Parsons and Rob Nathan. They're joining us today up in the gallery. Thank you.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, as we continue in Black History Month, just want to make note of the fact that there are many fine HBCUs in our country and our state. The first HBCU in our country was in Pennsylvania in 1837. In Tennessee, we have 7. Knoxville College, Lemoyne Owen College, Lane College, Fisk University, American Baptist College, Meharry Medical College, and of course, Tennessee State University. So I'm wearing this sweater this morning to highlight the many fine HBCUs we have in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Thank you. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please welcome my wife, Sherry, to the chamber. I think this is her first time ever coming in, so thank you for being here.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. And I would ask that everyone would please stand for a moment of silence. One of the members of our team in District 86, Lady Wanda Yvette Parham, passed away last week and have had her services. She worked on our team. She was just an extraordinary joy for so many people. She worked directly with my brother, Keyshawn Pearson, and someone we affectionately call Auntie Pink was her sister. And we are sad to lose her in our movement. And so just want us to recognize her contributions to the cause of justice. Amen.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing line with an S be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions line over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bills 2,966 through 2,968 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
I move that Senate Bills 181, 1,577, 1,605, 1,610, and 1,628 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk in third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration. House bills on second consideration. Petitions and memorials. Reports from standing committees. Reports from select committees. Calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration, keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays, 2 present, not voting.
Having received a constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call it first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1642, by Leader Lamberth and others, relative to defendants released while awaiting trial.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 1642 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendment's been filed.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill just makes public safety the first factor that you look at when considering bond and bond conditions. All the other factors will still be considered by the judge or the magistrate, but it makes public safety the first factor. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker and colleagues. I urge you to vote no against HB 1642. While it seems very simple according to what was just said, it actually erodes a fundamental value of the Tennessee Constitution and our principles of liberty. Liberty is a core value that we share as Tennesseans and Americans. We are all presumed innocent until and unless we are convicted of a crime. And the purpose of bail is to ensure that a person shows up to court appearances and isn't unnecessarily deprived of their liberty. In the United States, jailing someone who is not and may not ever be convicted of a crime is legally supposed to be a rare exception. For years, the bail system where I'm from in Shelby County locked up poor people, many of whom were never convicted of a crime for weeks, months, and even years simply because they couldn't buy their freedom. What was done in Shelby County, along with Republican District Attorney Amy Wyrick and others, was a championing of a new system of reform where victims and those impacted by crimes would be able to have their say. In talking with leaders in our community, from Just City and Josh Spickler to defense attorneys, this law, while it seems innocuous and not going to have much of an implication, is going against what we already have passed in this body. Tennessee law makes it clear that pretrial detention is supposed to be a last resort only when there are no other less restrictive means available. This less restrictive means is something like community-based monitoring, unsecured bond, release on recognizance. But the goal has always been in our state to ensure the appearance in court and the safety of our community. What this is seeking to do is destroy the belief around the presumption of innocence framework. Currently, judges choose whether or not someone gets bail through this order, and it's really important. You release someone on their own recognizance without conditions. Then you release with conditions. You determine which those conditions will be. You set bail in that order. But the goal is not, as this bill is going to do, prioritize one over the other. And by having legislation like this that is saying safety of the community over appearance in court, we are destroying the presumption of innocence by telling judges to determine whether somebody has done something right or done something wrong before a trial. None of the people pre-trial have been convicted of a crime. And this is giving leeway for judges to determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent. I disagree with this legislation in so many ways because it is going to lead to more people being incarcerated pre-trial before they have ever been convicted of a crime. If you look at 40-11-115A, you already have in Tennessee Code toward the end the focus on the appearance of the person as required and the safety of community. Our laws address this issue, and I am concerned that bail is being used as a red herring for dealing with the problems in our community related to public safety. But instead of attacking bail, we need to address the root causes of the problems, such as poverty, the lack of opportunity, gun violence. We need to address the root causes of the issues that we seek to handle. But this statement that this law or others like it will actually improve public safety are not true. And it should not be on the backs of those who are getting their liberty taken to help us to solve the quote unquote public safety problem. This undermines the fundamental constitutional guarantee that a person is innocent until proven guilty. This legislation is trying to be an easy answer to a complex and complicated problem. And it is only and disproportionately going to harm Black folks and poor folks in particular, which is why I am against this legislation, and I ask that all of you are against it too.
Leader Lambert? Nope. Representing Chairman Clemens?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I share a fundamental concern with this legislation. While I certainly agree with its premise, I think I agree with the sponsor's intent and the light touch here. By adding this language, I would point out that the criminal process, the criminal justice system and the process itself is designed to ensure the safety of the community. That language that we're adding here in the consideration, the safety of the community is a priority for everyone in the criminal justice system, without it even being explicitly stated. We elect judges in reliance on the value we believe that they place on ensuring a safe community. It would appear that this legislation, by expressly adding the language that you're seeking to add via codification, my concern is that we are placing something that is already inherently implied in the system above the constitutional right of the individual, the constitutional right of the individual being charged. As we all know, access to bail in the state of Tennessee is a fundamental constitutional right. It's not only guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, it's guaranteed by the Tennessee Constitution. In fact, the language in Article 1, Section 15 in our Declaration of Rights has remained unamended since 1796. This is a fundamental constitutional right. So my concern, Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Leader, if you could please respond to this, is that specific. Why are we adding language that is already inherently implied in the system and codifying that to give the appearance that we are placing that above the constitutional rights of the individual? That is my concern, that codification of that undue prioritization. If you could please respond to that.
Leader Lambert.
Absolutely. Chairman, thank you for that question. So all this does is shift a variety of factors that are there currently. And this is the one paragraph that literally makes the bill. In making a determination pursuant to subsection A1, the magistrate shall give first consideration to ensuring the safety of the community. Just first consideration. Everything you just said, I agree with virtually all of that. I mean, I've been an attorney for almost 20 years, and every single person that is charged is innocent until proven guilty. That never shifts in the system at all. And the next sentence of this is critical because, again, the individual rights of the person have to be preserved. It says, then the magistrate must impose the least restrictive conditions of release that will reasonably ensure the appearance of the person is required and the safety of the community. So bond has always been about making sure somebody shows up and making sure that the community is safe. So if somebody has an extensive criminal history or the facts of the case that are being alleged are particularly egregious with multiple victims, then look, they may have more bond conditions or a higher bond than somebody that's there on a shoplifting. And that's really all we're saying here is that of the list of factors that are considered now, this is just the first one they got to look at. So if it's a domestic abuser, then they're going to have to look at should an ankle monitor or GPS be placed on that person for public safety. But it's about looking at that first and then still looking at everything else and absolutely preserving, and I don't want to take up all your time, absolutely preserving the rights of that individual. And it's just making it a priority.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I think that second portion is what makes this a little easier to accept. However, it's that first part, that first prioritization. I think the first prioritization in any part of the criminal justice system is the individual liberty of the individual, the constitutional right of an individual. Our Constitution is very clear. Our laws are very clear. That individual has rights. It is a fundamental right. So prioritizing, codifying the top prioritization of something that's already inherently implied is my concern. The constitutional rights of the individual, their individual liberty and freedom, I think is the priority in the current system. And I am concerned that by expressly stating something else is prioritized, that's already implied is the concern here.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the entire system is designed about protecting those individual rights. We're talking about just bond here as one aspect of that system. While the entire system is protecting the individual rights, I just feel like we should make sure that when talking about bond and bond conditions, that the safety of the public should be the first thing they look at. Doesn't mean they can't look at everything else that they look at as part of that bond, but we as a body should be protecting our constituents in that manner. That's the reason I brought the bill.
Representative Lafferty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to voting for this bill in the positive, but I wanted to point out I'm constantly amazed that people from our colleagues from some of the most dangerous districts in this state continue to oppose the protection of the people in their community. The people in their community need to know that this bill is designed to help them.
We are talking about crime. He can talk about dangerous parts of the state. Is talking about Bell. He's within. No, he said colleagues. He did not call out anybody. Representative Lafferty, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of the interruptions from the endless interrupter, there is a
Representative Lafferty, please stick to the bill, please.
Yes, sir, Mr.
recognized.
Speaker. Thank you. My apologies to my friends on the other side. I am dismayed at the number of efforts that are made by certain members to continuously object to things that are intended purposefully to help their communities the most. The people in their districts are tired of it. They live in fear. They are worried constantly about sending their kids to school, making trips to the store. This is a small step that we can take to try to improve the safety of those communities. Thank you for the bill, sir.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, and I'll go directly to the point on that. I mean, every single Memphian is a Tennessean, and there were 398 murders in Memphis last year. That's literally more than the city of New York. We as Tennesseans must protect all of our communities from Mountain City to Memphis and come together to ensure that any single community in this state that is facing an increased amount of violent crime should be kept safe. That's what this bill helps to do in a small way.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we have each year a vast number of bills that come through the Criminal Justice Committee that deal with bail and bail bonding issues. It's a reoccurring theme since I've been here. This is my 6th year in the General Assembly. We see this each and every year where members are bringing legislation in these committees to address issues that impact their communities. It's unfortunate that we have issues in our communities that revolve around bail and pretrial release when violent crimes are committed in our communities. Fortunately, we have systems in place that help us to get through these challenges that we face. It's listed in code. We have constitutional rights, but at the end of the day, bail is a mechanism to get a defendant into court, someone who has been accused of a crime, not fully convicted, because you're not convicted. You are innocent and proven guilty, but you have this mechanism that gets you into court. That's what bail is for. Judges look through the list and they make these considerations that are listed in our code to make that determination whether or not they believe that this individual is going to come to court to face the charges that they've been charged with. By making a prioritization of the serious of the offense, number one, that gives an avenue to make sure that this person does report. Back in November, in one of the communities across our state, a gentleman killed 2 juveniles. He was released on his own recognizance, meaning that he was released from jail without any bond or stipulation to allow him to return back to the community. Family members and community members were outraged. Our office received phone calls, emails, just like I'm sure many of you did as well. I'm thankful that I live in a community where the magistrates, the judicial commissioners that I speak with on a regular basis make these considerations. This is one that they look at each and every time. When someone comes in with a crime that they've committed, they consider the seriousness of offense. That's one of the main factors they look at. There's other factors that they look at as well. But hearing from my magistrates, they think that this is a very good bill to help ensure the public safety of Tennessee. And so I'm thankful to our sponsor for carrying this bill, and I hope that everyone in here will support this legislation because it is much needed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well said, and thank you for helping to usher this through the entire system up to today, and I appreciate your words of support, sir.
All right. Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With previous question.
The previous question has been called. There is objection. We are on the board. On previous question. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 75, 21 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1642, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Representative, you can push the button at your desk, please. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 80, 13 nays, 3 present not voting.
House Bill 1642, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsiders tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1644 by Leader Lamberth and others relative to safety precautions taken in response to potential active shooter situations.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 1644 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know on the last bill, obviously, we can have a lot of policy debate back and forth, and that's important. On this one, I genuinely hope that we can all come together, Republicans and Democrats, all parts of the state. This is a bill that we passed in the special session. This bill is simple and straightforward, and it comes from a very direct and horrible circumstance that happened in our state, where 6 lives were lost due to a shooter that went into a school and killed 3 children and 3 adults. When that horrible, horrible person went into that school, it set off the fire alarm. She immediately killed the janitor downstairs at the Covenant School and went up the stairs. When she went up the stairs, there was a classroom of children that was doing exactly what they had been taught to do. When a fire alarm goes off and it's an unannounced fire alarm, kids get together, they form a line, and they head out the door into the hallway and head to safety. With permission of Miss Kinney, who's become a friend and whom I cherish her both advice and guidance as we are looking at different pieces of legislation, I will talk just for a moment about her son, William. He shares my name. He shares my son's name. He shares my father's name. Little William was doing exactly what he was trained to do in a fire drill, in a fire alarm. He led his class out in the hallway, and I'm confident that the last feeling that he felt was pride, that the children behind him would be safe because he was leading them there. Unfortunately, he ran in again to a monster that was there to do just what she did, which was to kill children. This bill says that when a fire alarm goes off in a school, anywhere in the state, public or private, that the very first thing will be a series of protocols that happen very quickly. We've worked with the different fire marshals, we've worked with different departments involved. We've crafted a bill that basically does what we do in Sumner County. When an unannounced fire alarm goes off in this crazy, evil world that we live in these days, you can't assume it's a fire. You just can't. It could be a tornado, it could be a fire, it could be a shooter. And while we work on lots of other bills to try to make sure that this world is safer for our children, this is one that will make a difference. I know Miss Kinney is proud of her son, William. I just wish that she still had him to hold and to watch him grow. But she doesn't. And I think we can do more, both with this bill and many other bills this year, to make Tennessee safer. So, members, I would ask that you join with me in this. It is, again, a very simple bill. It is a small step forward, but it is an important step forward. And I would ask that you vote yes. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to be honest with you, I don't have any problem with this bill. Sounds like a good step towards safety. But it's kind of like the previous bill and other bills. We're doing things after the fact. You know, worrying about an autopsy after someone's been murdered, it's after the fact. You know, worrying about bail after they've already killed somebody is after the fact. Worrying about the fire alarm after they're already in the school building with an assault rifle is after the fact. You know, I'm glad we're doing all these little things, but I'll be glad when we get down to the hard work of doing things to stop these tragedies from happening in the first place, so we don't have to do these little bills about, fire alarms. Thanks.
Leader Lamberth.
There's things left unsaid that are probably best left unsaid, especially amongst friends that have served together for a long time. It may be said by some that this is a small step. I said that myself, and it is. But a journey of 1,000 miles is a series of small steps. And it may not matter to some on taking those small steps, but legislating, as we have done for a dozen years together, is incremental. It doesn't happen all in one big motion or one big Hail Mary, and it's not always a home run. This is an important bill. It's important to me. I spent months on it. And yes, I understand it's not every single idea that everyone has ever had, but it matters to me. I hope it matters to us, and it certainly matters to Miss Kinney. And based on what she's gone through, there's probably 100 different bills that she'd love us to pass, and we can't bring her son back. But I know this bill will at least help some to save some lives. So I'm going to keep doing what I can do one step at a time. That's all I got.
Representative Pearson, or Mitchell, I'm sorry, you got time. Representative Mitchell. I didn't see you stand back up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad you're doing that. Just be willing to address concepts and issues that are uncomfortable with you that, you can give a little sometimes. You can sit down and have a discussion. No one's asking you to ever vote for it. At least let the subject matter be addressed. Like you said, some things should not be said, so I won't say them. But you and I know why some issues weren't addressed last year.
Representative Mitchell, I got it. We're talking about this bill, but you're getting close. We're getting close. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
There's not a conversation I won't have, and you know that, on any topic, on any issue. We may disagree from time to time, but I've always respected your perspective. I respect everyone in this chamber and everybody in this state. We're all trying to do the right thing. Let's do the right thing and vote yes on this one.
Representative Mitchell.
And like I said, I'm supporting your bill, but I'm just giving you notice that there's other issues you need to address. And there has been times where you didn't want to address other issues.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. I urge everyone to vote for this legislation. I've read it, creating a plan, working with LEAs, working with law enforcement as it relates to fire alarms is fine. Good idea. I'm surprised that they already don't have plans as it relates to fire alarms and fire drills. That's fine. My problem is not with this legislation. It's with the lackadaisical attitude on how we got to this point. The killing of people in our districts, as someone alluded to, and at the Covenant School, I thought would urge us to address the issue of gun violence. This legislation does not do that. It does not prevent guns from getting inside of the schools. It is saying, let's have a plan for when and if that happens again. That is not trying to eliminate the problem. Those incremental, as was mentioned by the sponsor, steps is again preparing for tragedy instead of preventing tragedies from happening in the first place. And our jobs as legislators, as people who live in the great state of Tennessee, where gun violence is the #1 killer of children, I would think our job as legislators would not just be to prepare for these incidents to happen in our schools, where our children and our neighbors and our nieces and our nephews learn, but rather prevent these tragedies from ever happening in our schools. But this legislation prepares for tragedy, doesn't prevent them. And I've yet to see, and I am obviously proposing legislation this session focused on preventing these tragedies at Covenant and across our communities from continuing to happen by dealing with the root causes and not just the horrid, horrible ramifications of them. And so, yes, some people can slow walk that journey of 1,000 miles or whatever, but others of us who are intentional and wanting to see progress and wanting to see change don't have time for some folk to slow walk their way to justice. We need them to speed up and to stop walking and to start running.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, sir, you'll forgive me. I've been here 12 years and have passed hundreds of bills that have helped make this state safer. So I truly believe in that journey of 1,000 steps, and each one of them is important. I value every single one of them, and I value the work of this body, and especially those members that have been here long, long before I ever got here, that were working on these issues and trying to improve our state. Folks can focus on just one big thing and hope that it passes, while the rest of us focus on hundreds of things that will actually make a difference.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you for saying that. And folks, number of years of service doesn't mean numbers of years of impacting and preventing tragedies. Because I don't know, you mentioned this statistic in the previous thing, but I want to stay on this bill. and make sure that we're focused on why I think this is an ineffective piece of legislation to address the root causes of the problem that created it, because it was the smoke from an AR-15 that led to the fire alarm going off at this school. So I want to make sure that we stay focused on that. But in your 12 years, it didn't prevent the Covenant shooting. It didn't prevent the 398 homicides in Memphis, Tennessee. It didn't prevent gun violence being the #1 killer of children in our state. It didn't prevent all of that. So you may have been doing a lot for 12 years, but you've got a whole lot more that you need to do. Seconds.
Leader Lambert, he stopped. You got Leader Lambert. Are you saying that you don't? I can come back here for a second. Would you don't want to respond? All right. Representative Pearson?
Thank you so much. As us pass this legislation, but let us commit to passing more legislation that prevents gun violence in our state. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wanted to say thank you to the sponsor. Myself, I've served as a substitute teacher, so I'm glad you included that language with regard to that, because so many of us go into those schools and we're unfamiliar with the students that are there and the policies and procedures for each school and the exits. And so, by establishing this sort of plan, it helps us to ensure the safety of our students. And I know that so many of us have a heart to serve in that way, and we're there, and we want to make sure that we're pronouncing the children's names correctly, to ensuring that they come home to their parents, because that's their heart. And so I'm grateful to you for doing this. I think this is an important step, and it does add value to our community, and it gives reassurances to our parents, to our teachers, and all of our staff that are working collectively to take care of our precious cargo, which is our children. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you for getting us back on the bill and away from unusual personality conflicts. But on this particular bill, I'm so glad you mentioned substitute teachers, because one of the things that our county does, and every county will have to do as part of this, is make sure that their substitute teachers are trained on the same protocols that, while the rest of us work on, again, improving the safety of our state, we live in the reality of right now that there are dangerous individuals out there that are intent on mayhem and death and destruction towards our children. And our substitute teachers serve so valiantly to try to just teach our kids. And they need to know those same protocols and methods of being able to protect their children in a difficult circumstance. So it is an important part of this bill that no one else has mentioned, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill. As a former principal of an elementary school, you don't know how important it is when you have the job of the safety and security of such precious souls, that when you know exactly what's going to happen if a fire drill goes off or whatever kind of alarm when someone comes into your school, because you want to do the right thing. We're on this particular bill at this time, and I want to thank the sponsor for thinking ahead and protecting our young children. Thank you.
Representative Warner.
Thank you, Speaker. Please roll me one spot, and I want to give Gloria Johnson here, or Representative Johnson here, a chance to speak.
Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to my colleague. Just a quick question, because I wasn't in there, and so as a teacher, I have to ask this question. Is this something you've talked with the fire department, fire marshals on? I'm assuming so, but I wasn't there. I just have to consider how quickly we have to act and stuff. I support the idea of your bill, absolutely. I just want to make sure there was some discussion there.
Leader Lambert.
Yes, we spent months last year really in preparation of the special session in hopes that those chambers would pass a variety of bills, met with their fire marshals, met with the state agencies, and in fact, the Sumner County delegation met with our local, both LEA, school resource officers, director of schools, and really fashioned this in a way that it is not prescriptive. We don't want every single district to be exactly the same. Every single school will be slightly different, but they all have to be thinking about this. Again, while we work on a variety of solutions and issues, to just right now say, look, you've got to have these protocols in place, and they happen very quickly. I mean, The example that I gave, I think in committee, was most of the time that we were growing up, if there was a fire in a building and there was a closed door, we were taught as children, look, feel the knob of the door, smell, look for smoke under the door, because you don't want to open that door if there's fire on the other side. And we were taught those protocols. So in these circumstances that are getting just heinous, those are the type of protocols that, unfortunately, there are some tried and true methods they can go through quickly to identify what type of emergency. The best case scenario would be based on a bill we passed last year that, again, Republicans and Democrats alike had amendments on, to have an alert system within the school that has different types of alerts. Some schools just use their PA system for that, and that's fine. That can be part of their protocol. But the best case scenario is an instant alert type system where it's not just a fire alarm for any type of emergency, where it can be a differentiated type alarm. But look, I get that. That costs a lot of money. We put some grant funds out there, but it can be different in every district. But yes, we definitely met with local folks, and that's how we helped develop this bill.
Representative Johnson.
Local folks and fire department, fire officials, fire marshals. I want to just make sure they're okay with that because, all right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Representative Warner, you recognize, I believe you have a colleague on your other side of the chamber that would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will give him a chance too.
All right, roll one spot without objection. Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader Lambert, thank you for this legislation. I just kind of want to get a little bit better understanding of what this is actually doing. First, is there any fiscal cost to this legislation?
Leader Lambert.
No, it is not significant.
Representative Gant.
And I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to talk with you before this. So if an alarm goes off, a fire alarm goes off in a school, under this legislation, in that school, how is this going to treat that alarm differently?
Representative Lambert.
They will not assume in every circumstance that it is a fire alarm. We fortunately have been very successful in the state of protecting children in schools from fires. But there are other types of emergencies that happen. There are tornadoes. There are, unfortunately, active shooter situations. There's a variety of circumstances that can happen, but it's the fire alarm many times that goes off and is the only alert in a school. I mean, and as I mentioned earlier, the best case scenario is to have multiple types of alerts, which I know is an issue you have worked on for quite some time. Schools, as part of this bill, can definitely use a differentiated system like that. There are wearable devices for teachers. There are, alerts that can go out school-wide. There's things that are extremely technologically advanced, but this can be something as simple as just the steps that a teacher would go through as soon as that fire alarm goes off to determine, all right, what exactly type of situation are we dealing with here? And I will say at Covenant, once it was clear the type of emergency and the type of unimaginable situation they were dealing with, the active shooter protocol saved lives at that school because they immediately went into that mode and then those protocols kicked in. We just want those protocols to kick in earlier.
Representative Gant.
That's great. So what this actually is going to do is encourage the local schools, local LEAs to look at these first alert panic systems that does differentiate a fire alarm from an active shooter to a medical alert to various emergencies that would arise at a school. So I appreciate you bringing this legislation, and it hits at the heart of what I've been working on. So I'm thankful for what you're doing, and I appreciate you bringing the legislation.
Representative Warner.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Speaker. I'll call the previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? I see none. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1644 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 97, no nays.
House Bill 1644 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reeks there is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1645 by Leader Lambert and others, relative to lifetime orders of protection.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 1645 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lambert moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer sponsor for further explanation.
Chair Farmer moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if you're seeing a theme here, this was another bill that we passed in the special session. I hope that we see virtually every single bill that we pass in the House in the special session be reintroduced and passed on the House floor. Hopefully our Senate counterparts will pass these as well, and they can become law. This bill comes from a lady who I'll name publicly, Miss Nikki Gozer. Nikki came to me several years ago. She was being stalked from prison by the man who had killed her husband. And unfortunately, she had to go every single year and get an order of protection renewed in order to be able to keep that person from contacting her. We put a bill in place at that time for a very limited number of offenses that would just create a lifetime order of protection so that the victim the survivor does not have to go back every year. This bill adds aggravated stalking, a felony, and felony harassment, which again is only in those worst of the worst scenarios, but it just adds lifetime order protection for those circumstances and makes sure that these strong survivors do not have to go back to court every single year and have to look at the person who has victimized them and beg the court to give them that much more protection. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, not one word in this piece of legislation mentions a weapon. Is that correct?
Leader Lamberth.
No, sir. These folks are convicted felons, and this is about lifetime orders of protection. Obviously, if for some reason that underlying charge ever went away, this can be lifted. This just makes sure that these survivors don't have to go back every year.
Representative Moon.
Thank you very much to the sponsor, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader Lamberth, I appreciate you bringing this bill. I know that this has been a process and you're adding some extenuating circumstances to it, but I wanted to give some flavor. I've prosecuted these myself in court many, many times in orders of protection. And when I advise that particular person that this could go away in a year, if that particular person doesn't violate the order of protection, the sense of fear comes over their eyes and says, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So we watch for that whole year and see what happens. And they come back to court to try to get it extended. And many, many times my experiences have been when that's been extended, you could get extended now for a year or up to 5 years, I believe. And if it doesn't, they walk out of that courtroom. And I've had this happen twice. Within a week or 10 days, they've been subjected to further violence where they just had an order of protection against this particular person that continues to think they can dominate this particular person. So to see someone that can walk out of a courtroom that has achieved an order of protection, that now can know for their lifetime, they'll never have to revisit that fear of worrying what they're going to do when they step foot to their car, go to work, go home, someone's there. This is sorely needed, and I appreciate this legislation to continue to keep the public safe, even those that have been abused by someone that they know. So thank you very much for bringing this piece of legislation. I hope to vote for this twice.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you so very much for that. And I also want to thank Chairman Todd, who's up here, for amending the effective date. This was going to be effective later in the year, but if this were to make it through both chambers and signed by the governor, it's effective upon becoming law. Why wait to help protect folks? I mean, we should do it as soon as possible. So thank you for your comments, sir. Thank you for your support.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just had a quick question. On the first subsection A, it says if they've been convicted of a felony offense. Does that mean if they've been previously convicted of a felony and on an unrelated charge, or is that in conjunction with like the aggravated stalking or harassment?
Leader Lamberth.
So that Section A restates the current law where we added in family members of victims of murder, and there were just a couple of top-level felonies that we added in. And so that includes those under 39.
Representative Dixie.
So if they have already been convicted of a felony on a previous charge, it's hard to talk over 6'4", a good looking 6'4" guy. But anyway, so now I can see you. So basically, I just want for clarification, if they have been previously convicted of a felony on an unrelated charge, they can now have a lifetime. If they get convicted of harassment or felony harassment or aggravated stalking, they can be used under this law, under this bill.
Leader Lambert.
So we didn't include all felonies. We didn't include anything else except we just added felony, aggravated stalking, and felony harassment. So we literally just added those two offenses. But I think this, bless you, you have to be convicted of those before the survivor of those crimes would be able to get the lifetime order of protection. So while these are in process, if someone has been charged with them, and maybe this is to your point, if they've been charged with felony harassment or aggravated stalking, you can't get a lifetime order of protection. You could go get the regular order of protection, which is renewable each year, as Representative Garrett said, but only if they go through the whole process and are convicted of these felonies, then the victim could go down and get a lifetime order of protection.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you, sponsor, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, there have been a lot of women that have been battered that would appreciate this legislation. They live in fear. They run, from their person that's been assaulting them. In this legislation, is there anything that talks to the penalty for a person who violates the order of protection, this lifetime order of protection? Is it?
Leader Lambert.
There's nothing in this legislation. It would be the same penalties if they violated order of protection now. So if someone's been given notice of that order of protection and they've been given notice, they have to stay away from that other person. It is in most circumstances a misdemeanor to violate that, but they can be arrested on that. They can be held accountable, but we did not shift the penalties one way or the other on this bill. We just added these two new felonies to the list of felonies that a survivor could go get a lifetime order of protection for. So the penalties for an order of protection are still the same under a lifetime order of protection.
Leader Camper.
Okay, thank you. And we could talk about this later in terms of what those penalties are now, and maybe there needs to be, we could think about enhancements to it. It's just a thought. I was curious, since it's lifetime, that maybe there would be an enhancement if they were in violation of it, because a lot of these women still live in fear, even though we'll have a lifetime protection. If somebody wants to get at them, they're still running with their children to avoid, people coming after them. So I was just curious about that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr.
Leader Lambert.
To that point, and I would love to see legislation of that nature. We just didn't include it in this. Ms. Gozer, who I mentioned, the man who literally was stalking her and murdered her husband in front of her was still sending her letters. They fortunately went to her lawyer's office. He doesn't know where she is, but he will be released at some point. He actually got convicted of a second-degree murder and was charged by the federal government with federal crimes for harassing her from prison. And I think he only got like a year tacked onto his sentence. And so the penalties are way too low for some of these repetitive violent felons. But at some point he will get out. And fortunately, Nikki has a lifetime order of protection. But yeah, I mean, the penalties probably should go up. It's just not part of this bill.
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Is there objection? There's objection. We're on the board for previous question. All those in favor of previous question vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 75, 20 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1645 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 1645 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1170 by Representative Hakeem relative to medical care.
Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1170 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hakeem moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is require the Tennessee Peace Officers Standards and Training Post Commission to adopt guidelines and materials that law enforcement officers, in regards to best practices for recognizing and responding to a medical crisis involving a person under arrest or under the care or supervision of law enforcement officers. It specifies that the guidelines and materials must not require an officer to undergo specialized medical training for the purpose of becoming post-certified. We have been communicating with Commerce and Insurance and Post, and to my knowledge, there are no objections, and the cost is insignificant. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move for passage.
Representative Hakeem renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1170 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays, 3 present, unvoted.
House Bill 1170 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1778 by Chairman Reagan relative to the Board of Control of the Tennessee Corrections Institute.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sorry. I move passage of House Bill 1778 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage. Bobby seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill extends the Board of Control of Tennessee Corrections Institute to 2029. The Tennessee Corrections Institute is an agency that inspects and certifies local jails and detention facilities throughout the state and is responsible for providing training to the staff of those facilities. The Board of Corrections establishes the standards to inspect and certify these local correctional facilities and is the governing body of the Tennessee Corrections Institute. The Board of Control has 7 members appointed by the governor. This board was in a sunset hearing held by the Judiciary and Government Joint Government Operations Subcommittee on October 18th, 2023, where this recommendation for the extension was made. This recommendation from the subcommittee was confirmed by the full Joint Government Operations Committee and also by the House Government Operations Committee. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I stand ready to answer questions.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Previous question.
Previous question has been called. Is there objection? There's objection. We're on previous question. We're on previous. Representative, you're going to be ruled out of order. You cannot shout on the House floor. Thank you. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 18 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting on House Bill 1778. All those in favor of House Bill 1778 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, 2 nays.
House Bill 1778 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1774 by Chairman Reagan relative to the State Protest Committee.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1774 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage. Bobby seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion and stand ready for questions.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question on as I read this, it removes requirement that the chief procurement officer send minutes of the protest proceedings to the state protest committee and comptroller. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Chairman Reagan.
There's a requirement that the chief procurement officer does send those minutes. This was a legislative recommendation from the comptroller's office as part of their audit report on the Department of General Services, which includes the state protest committee.
Representative Miller.
So it's based on the comptroller's recommendation. Is that my understanding?
Reagan.
You are correct, sir.
Representative Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection to the previous question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1774 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 1774 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1648 by Representative McCalman relative to salvage titles.
Representative McCalman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1648 and third and final consideration.
Representative McCalman moves passage by second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative McCalman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill deals with establishing a process in which wrecked salvage vehicles sitting on a salvage yard can be abandoned with a lien-free title. Many of these vehicles are total losses and have been sitting in these salvage yards for sometimes well over a year and have an immense amount of storage accrued on these vehicles. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative McCalman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the no-look call. So, I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear on exactly what we're doing here, and I apologize. I didn't hear it in committee.
Representative McCalman.
Thank you, Speaker. Representative Parkinson, when you wreck your car, you make an insurance claim. Oftentimes, most often, especially if it's going to be a total loss, the insurance company will direct a salvage yard to go pick it up. They bring it to the salvage yard. That doesn't necessarily mean that the insurance company is going to cover you. If the insurance company decides to deny your claim, in essence, they're telling you, hey, we're not going to cover you. You need to go pick up your car. That responsibility then falls on that insurance company's customer to go collect their car. Oftentimes, what this bill speaks to is establishing a process that by 2 certified mailings over the course of a 30-day period, the salvage yard, if the owner does not come to pick it up, and I said oftentimes this is well over a year that these vehicles sit on their property, this allows the salvage company to apply for a salvage title, lien-free salvage title, in order to sell it and dispose of it and get off the property.
Representative Parkinson.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this bill, Representative. It came through transportation. I believe it passed almost unanimously. There was one no vote, I believe. Just a couple of clarifying questions. Does this bill deprive anyone of a drivable vehicle?
Representative McCalman.
Chairman Howell, no, sir. It is a wrecked vehicle that would not be in any roadworthy condition.
Representative Howell.
Thank you. One more question. Is your bill intended to help the towing companies move these total vehicles off of their property so that it doesn't inadvertently turn their property into a junkyard?
Representative McCalman.
Yes, Chairman Howell, it is. It will help tow yards. It helps salvage yards. It essentially frees up valuable space. Many times these tow companies aren't more than quarter acres. Space is valuable to them. If those tow yards cannot maintain that space in order to turn over vehicles, tow companies essentially are just going to stop picking up vehicles. So yes, it is very helpful in that industry.
Representative Howell.
Thank you for the bill. Proud to vote for it and support it.
Representative McCalman. Anything? Good. Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you all for the conversation related to these bills. I know debate is extremely important here, and so I appreciate not calling the question before I had a chance to speak on it. And I remember seeing this in subcommittee and in committee and sponsor. Thank you, because as our colleagues who voted for it, I believe in the intent of the legislation. which is to help salvage yards to get access to more space, to get the lien on these vehicles that have been totaled or that an insurance company has said they are not going to pay for. I think it's a good idea, but there were some reservations that I had when this was in committee that I wanted to make sure we brought to the committee of the whole here, which is the amount of time that it takes for the salvage yard to get control of these cars. An individual who learns that their insurance company is no longer going to total their vehicle out is given only 30 days to get access to this car. When this happens, there are two notices that are given. One is sent immediately by the salvage yard to the individual owner that says, hey, you're about to lose possession of your car if you don't come and get it. And there's a second one 14 days later that says a similar thing that's sent through certified mail. I think our salvage yards and owners and operators of those industries are going to benefit from this. We know how important it is for people to be able to have that space. And so I don't disagree with that at all. But I am and still am concerned about the timing. Giving individuals only 30 days to get access to what might be their only means of transportation, despite the condition that is in, is not enough time when in our state, the minimum wage is $7.25. And if I remember what the sponsor said in committee correctly, people could have fines of up to $1,000. And so if you are an indigent or a poor person who this is your only means of transportation and you have just learned from your insurance company that they are not going to cover the cost of totaling your vehicle, and this is your only means of transportation, how else are you going to get around? You have to have access to this vehicle, but you need the time to be able to pay the fines that the salvage yard has racked up over time, which is why in committee, I was behooving you that we might expend the amount of time to allow for people to be able to pay to get access to their car. The other concern is that it is done by certified mail. You all know the mailing system just as I do. I love USPS, always supporting them. But the reality is the amount of time that something might take can get interrupted as we had with a winter or weather storm. And that is not being taken into account, nor was an electronic provision added into this legislation, which was actually recommended by Chairman Howell when we were in committee. And so, again, I believe the timing being extended is something that's extremely important here. I believe having other methods for people to be able to receive notification are important here. And these things are lacking in this legislation, which is why in its current form, I would urge all of you not to support it. Although, again, the intent of it is good, sponsor. I think I completely understand that. The reality is there are some provisions within this legislation that are going to be harmful to people in our communities who this might be their only means of transportation, particularly if, as you mentioned, they need this car to not only be taken off of the yard, but then need a lot of work to be done to it. And so that's why I cannot support this legislation in its current form, while I appreciate the overarching intent of it. Thank you.
Representative McCalman.
To my colleague from Shelby County, thank you for your comments. Again, these vehicles have been wrecked, sometimes well beyond repair. They have sat in the facility for oftentimes well over a year, on average 352 days. This is not in most cases, this is not a late model vehicle. This is a vehicle that's 20, 30 years old. It's not going to be fixable and has been sitting in the dirt, in the elements, and available to who knows what kind of animals coming through the salvage yards for almost a year. And the insurance company has directed the owner of this vehicle that we are not going to pay this claim for you. And that vehicle will still continue to sit for a year in the dirt, in the elements. All this does is provide a process for that salvage company, who is now on the hook for that space, to get it off their property and recoup some of their cost. Thank you.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question be called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1648, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, 1 nay, 1 present, not voted.
House Bill 1648, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1647 by Chairman Moon, relative to county budgeting.
Let journal reflect Representative Williams is excused. Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1647 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Moon moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1647 amends Local Option Budgeting Act of 1993. This bill requires that all requests for amendments to the county budget that are being proposed after the budget has been passed, if the requesting party has an appointed or electing governing body, that body must vote by a majority before it is brought before the county legislative body. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Moon renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1647 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 1647, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 284 by Chairman Whitson, relative to thresholds for competitive sealed bids.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 284 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Whitson moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 284 is a cleanup bill. I call it the same squared bill. This bill makes no policy changes to the TCA. The permissive maximum permitted sealed bid threshold of $50,000 established by this General Assembly in 2022 is not changed by this legislation. This legislation will simplify the purchasing process by eliminating 15 sections of code that were not updated in 2022 when the General Assembly established the new maximum sealed bid threshold. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Whitson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 284 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? House Bill 284, having received a constitutional majority. Oh, take the vote, Mr. Clerk. My apologies.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 284, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 862 by Representative Hardaway and others, a resolution to honor the memory of Sarah L. Lewis of Memphis.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I move adoption of House Joint Resolution 862.
Representative Hardaway moves adoption. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. The House Joint Resolution for Commissioner Sarah Lee Lewis has special meaning for Memphis and Shelby County, but it also has special meaning for me. Ms. Lewis was the last living soul who had permission from my parents, who are passed now, to snatch me up whenever she thought it was necessary. And true enough, I know it's hard for y'all to believe, but I haven't always been this well behaved and orderly. Ms. Lewis was unusual in the combination of intellect and the willingness to sacrifice her personal goals in order to look after the public interest. Ms. Lewis was one of the few who went to college, got a college degree, and then turned around and got her high school degree. Ms. Lewis actually tested into Lemoyne and then college, and then she went back in the later years to actually get her high school diploma. Unusual, but that's the word for Miss Lewis. She had the wit, the intelligence, the fire, the convictions, the courage to act on those convictions that together are a rarity. They were a rarity then. They are a rarity now to find in one person. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to have been able to speak on Ms. Sarah Lewis, the influence that she has had with me personally, and most of the members standing up here, no matter their age or when they went into public service, Ms. Sarah Lee Lewis had something to do with them either deciding to go into public service or how they've conducted their business since they've been elected. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hardaway renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move for previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 862, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 862 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 863 by Representative Hardaway and others, a resolution to honor the memory of Janet Hooks of Memphis.
Representative Hardaway, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I move adoption of House Joint Resolution 863.
Representative Hardaway moves adoption, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hardaway, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Colleagues, again, I have a personal connection with Janet Hooks. Janet was like a sister to me. Her public service, the emphasis that any and everyone who talked about her would say they've never seen that combination of beauty and brains. The work that she's done when she served on the city council, the different appointments that she's had in different administrations. She was an unusual woman. She was very dear to me. Her husband, Michael Hooks Sr., and her son, and I won't get into all the things that Michael and I have done, but we were like family. Michael Sr. and I would get in a bit of mischief every now and then. But the one person who could spot us out where we didn't even try to explain it away was his wife, Janet Hooks. When she called us, it was just time for a confession. Okay? So I thank the family for the opportunity that they gave the city of Memphis, Shelby County, and the state of Tennessee to enjoy the services, to enjoy, once again, the beauty and brains of the mother, Janet Hooks, the wife, Janet Hooks, and Janet was also a daughter of Nashville, Davidson County. So that public servant is one that I want you to feel as good as I do about being able to honor her today, singularly with her House Joint Resolution. With that, Speaker Sexton, I renew my motion.
Representative Hardaway renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move for previous question.
Previous question be called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 863, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 863, under received constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. Most reconsiders table. Next order, Mr. Clerk. Yeah, you were close. I messed up today. You caught yourself.
Unfinished business.
Representative Carr, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Bill 178 from the committee and the House.
You heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Bills 578, 580, 581, 638, and 639 from the committee and the House.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Butler, we're on unfinished business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to recognize our leadership Overton group that's up here in the gallery today from Overton County. Just want to make them feel welcome.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That House, after conferring with the Minority Leader, I move that House Bills 1,640 and 1,658 be heard in the Finance Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 1,191 be heard in the Government Operations Committee next week.
For the motion, any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 949 be heard in the Insurance Subcommittee next week.
For the motion, any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know I'm out of order, but I think we might need a moment of silence because this, unfortunately, is going to be the last Ties for Turns announcement this year. I want to thank Representative Hill, Representative Faison, Representative Powers for the donations today. And I want to thank each and every member that has donated to Ties for Turns this year. Honestly, this is a record haul for Ties this year. Seriously. So y'all give yourselves a round of applause. I appreciate that. And the event is going to happen this Monday at 9 a.m. I think we're on the 8th floor at 9 a.m. this morning, Monday morning. So if you can make it by, we'll have breakfast. We'll have the interns, we'll have fellowship, and we will try to give away all of the ties, the suits, the shirts, the shoes, and everything else that's been donated. And again, thank you so much. This is the last one. It just saddens my soul that I can't announce Ties for Turns anymore this year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my colleagues, I can't compete with the Ties for Turns, but I will remind you that on the 13th, between 2:30 and 4:30, we'll have Nuclear and Innovative Energy Day on the Hill. We'll have representatives from Oak Ridge National Lab, Y12, Ultra-Safe Nuclear, Proton Power. It'll be an interesting afternoon looking at Tennessee's energy future. Thank you.
Representative Reagan, did I see your hand up earlier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is just a reminder that the amendment filing deadline for the House Government Operations Committee and the deadline for public comment or presenters in that committee is Friday prior to 4:30, 16:30. So the deadline for both amendments and speakers for our upcoming House Government Operations Committee is tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those of you who have the great joy and opportunity to serve on Finance Committee, just a reminder that if you're going to go by and visit with Representative Parkinson and Ties for Turns, do that before 9. I'm sure he'll be there early to accommodate you because at 9, we will begin our budget hearings again, Monday morning at 9. See all the Finance Committee there then. Thank you.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to remind you once again to please get your amendments in for the Transportation Omnibus Bill, the naming of roads and bridges, specially licensed plates. I've only received one amendment so far. We normally operate around 30 or so. So the deadline will be approaching, and once the deadline is passed, it'll be too late. Please get them to me. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the following reports have been filed with the clerk's office and are available for review by any member who wishes to do so. The recommendations of the Tennessee Medical Cannabis Commission 2024 report, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services Federal 2024 Block Grant and other federal funding report, the Health Department of Education Tennessee Safe Schools report, the Health Facilities Commission Nursing Home Inspection and Enforcement Activities, the TennCare Federal Funding State Fiscal Year 2023, the Department of Children's Services Annual Report, State Fiscal Year July 2022 through June 2023, the Tennessee Ethics Commission Report on Compliance with Tennessee Code Annotated 8-17-104, the Department of Human Services Public Chapter 192 Report, the Department of Commerce and Insurance Mental Health Parity Public Chapter 244 Report, the Department of Revenue Federal Grants Public Chapter 192 Report, the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability TN Options Program Report, the Tennessee Palliative Care and Quality of Life Advisory Council Report 2024, the Tennessee Department of Children's Services Annual Report Fiscal Year 23, Office of Juvenile Justice, and the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth 2023 State of the Child in Tennessee Report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 4 p.m. on Monday, February 12th, 2024.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 4 p.m. on Monday, February 12th, 2024.